Hi everyone, and welcome to this incredible transfer panel. I'm so excited to have these tremendous guests here with us. Just for anyone who doesn't know, my name is Karina, and I'm the lead mentor with the Mentors at the Anza program. It's basically a brand new program piloted this fall, which helps community college, it helps De Anza and Foothill students get paired up with a second or third year, as well as host transfer panels and other events that try and help students go to the community, go to the university, transfer to the university they want to. So we're very happy to have all of you here. I know Stanford was a very requested university. We had an overwhelming amount of support for this university. So I know it's something we're all interested in. The great news is the applications are still further out. So if you're stressed out at UCs, you can wait till you're done with that and then start on the Common App. And yeah, I'd just like to introduce our guests, or actually let them introduce themselves.
Okay, hi, my name is Ariana. I'm a political science major. I'm on the Justice and Law and International Relations tracks. I transferred from the College of San Mateo, where I was also a political science major. I guess you'll hear more about me through this, but I've done a lot of different things in social justice and leadership and things like that. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Karina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shadi El-Aridi. I am a mechanical engineering student that transferred to Stanford last year. So this is my first quarter at Stanford. I transferred from Ohlone College, and yeah, that's about me. I'll tell you a bit more as we go on to the questions.
Hi, my name is Dale, and I transferred this quarter from Los Guadamas College in the East Bay, and I'm studying economics. You'll get to hear more about me as we go on.
Thank you so much. So getting right into the questions, my first question for you guys is one, why did you choose to go to community college? And what was one of your favorite things about the community college you chose?
Okay, so unlike most of the people I met, I actually chose to go to community college my junior year of high school. I went to a really competitive public high school, and sorry, I'm getting distracted by the questions in the chat. But basically, it was really competitive. I was taking a lot of APs, studying for the SAT, and I kind of realized I didn't know why I was doing any of those things or what really my purpose was with any of that. And community college kind of gave me the ability to give myself time to figure all of that out. College of San Mateo is one of three sister schools you probably know since you all go to De Anza, but I picked between CSM, Kenyatta, and Skyline. I just liked CSM because I thought it was the prettiest, but also it felt like there were a lot of opportunities there that I could do well in. And one of my favorite parts of the College of San Mateo were just the people and the amazing and supportive faculty and staff.
For me, it was more, I spent most of my life overseas. I spent between third and my senior year of high school is when I came back. And this kind of messed up my transcript in the sense that my GPA was just full of pass or fail classes that transferred from overseas. So really the only option I had at the time was to go to community college. So I went to the nearest community college nearby, which was Ohlone College. And I picked it because there's just a great community built around the engineering program specifically, and just tremendous students that are really that have similar goals as I do. And yeah.
I went to community college just because it was close to my home, and at the time, I did not know what I wanted to really do with myself. When I was in high school, I saw myself going to an Ivy League, but as senior rolled around, I realized that my GPA and my scores just weren't there, and I really felt like I was tired of being in school. So I decided to do a 180, and I pursued careers in public service, such as through the military and through law enforcement. And it was through that I found community college to be the best resource to get into that. But it was also a great thing that community college gave me the flexibility to pivot again and go into economics.
So the next question is, what do you think was the strongest part of your application? Do you think it was your grades, your essays, extracurriculars, or something else?
So I think for my private schools, I guess we're specifically talking Stanford, I genuinely believe that the application is completely comprehensive, or that's not exactly what I mean, but it's just like every single part I felt mattered. I don't think that I would have gotten in had I slacked in any of those categories. But if I really had to choose, I would say my recommendation letters probably gave me a bit of a leg up.
I absolutely agree with Ariana. Echoing what she said, I think like the concept of having a very well-rounded application in general is key to getting into like a top school. And yeah, I think it's just very important to have a well-rounded application, because most of the application pool is already full of students that have high GPAs or very good letters of recommendation. So just having a very well-rounded application in general is key in my opinion.
For me, I think the most important part of my application was me emphasizing my military service. And it was because I volunteered for a lot of tasks when I was in the Army Reserve, such as going to Korea 4 times and going on active duty for several months as I worked on being a full-time intelligence analyst. My work there gave me a lot of things to write about, and it helped shape me as a person. And I really did my best to convey that in my essays. And I think it was a great thing to write about.
Thank you. That's actually very helpful. My question would be, why did you choose Stanford, and where did you apply to other universities?
Okay, so I ended up applying to 5 schools. I did Cal Poly SLO because I wanted to do one CSU, 2 UCs, UCLA and UC Berkeley, and then 2 private, Stanford and Georgetown. I got into all of them except Georgetown. That's fine. But I ultimately picked Stanford because I really wanted a smaller environment. I don't do very well in larger class sizes. My classes right now have like one class has 7 people in it, and I do really well in classes like that. So that was a really big part of it, as well as the assumption that if we ever go onto campus, it would just be like about 8,000 undergrads as opposed to 20,000. So yeah.
I applied all over. I applied to a bunch of UCs, I applied to a bunch of privates, and ultimately I chose Stanford because it was at the top of my list. It's really based on like reputation of the school and being nearby. I've been to campus a few times, and I just was amazed by their facilities and the students that are there. So yeah, so I applied to a bunch of schools, and Stanford was on top of that list.
Hi, I chose Stanford because it was relatively close to me in the Bay Area, and I wanted a school that was very well known for its research and economics, which Stanford is as good as it gets, I think, when it comes to economic research. And also, I had family that went to Stanford, so that also influenced my decision.
Thank you. So just to get the stats out of the way, could you tell us what your SAT or SAT score was and your GPA when at the time of transfer?
I hate to be this person, but I want to just put a disclaimer out there. You can go on the Stanford website for transfers and literally look at the average stats of every single transfer. Like, you'll see that for the ACT, you only need above a 30. You don't need a 36. For the SAT, the averages are in the 600s. You don't need to get a perfect score. Just to put that out there, because I know everyone freaks out about this. You can just calm down. It's okay. For me, I had a 4.0. I had an SAT score that I took in high school, which was 1320. I submitted that, but then I also took the ACT and I got a 32 cumulatively on that, but Stanford asks you to put in like every category and you can self-report if anyone's curious.
Yeah, echoing also what Ariana said, it's not the biggest thing. It's not the biggest deal in the world. I did have a 4.0 GPA, and I believe my ACT score was like 33, I believe. But yeah, it's not the most important thing in the world, so don't stress about it.
My GPA at the time of applying was also a 4.0, although with COVID that was no more. And my ACT cumulative score was a 33.
All right, so on to the fun part, your essays. Do you have any helpful tips about writing your essays, how much time it took for you, who should look over it, that kind of information?
It'll be interesting to see what Shadi and Dale say, because when we talked like amongst us transfers, there were some people who literally wrote their essays like the night before. I wrote my essays after I took the ACT, so like mid-February. They're due March 15th, I think, or they were last year. I think the second part of the question was like tips. I think that it's really important to be authentic in these essays. They are very different from the UC essays that you're working on right now. You have a longer word count for your letter of intent, and that's really an area you want to focus on. And then the other questions are really pushing you to demonstrate like who you are. I think Googling the questions or going on College Central is not the way to go. I also think that vulnerability is incredibly important. And if you sometimes sharing your essay makes it harder to be vulnerable. Personally, I had more people look at my UC essays than my private school essays. And I had one very close friend read through my private school Stanford essays, and she only edited for grammar. I didn't let her touch the content because I really wanted to be authentic and vulnerable. And I know that that is really, really hard, much easier said than done. But a lot of it is just to not overthink and just be honest about who you are and why you want to go to that school.
I think it's very important throughout the essays for the Stanford application specifically to recognize who you are and what you've learned throughout your time at community college or any institution you're transferring from. Throughout the 2-3 years, however many years you have been at your institution, you have gained a lot of knowledge and you have also built a story for yourself. And I think it's important to recognize that. And that took most time throughout my application specifically. I started writing the UC essays and then I had finished submitting my UC applications and I built upon that to write my Stanford application and an array of other schools. I think it's just very important to recognize who you are because that's the highlight of your essay. Who you've really, the character you've built throughout your time at community college is what's going to get you into Stanford or any other school for that matter. Aside from that, I think I did not have my essay reviewed by anyone else because I wanted to reflect my character. I would like to say, like, reiterate, it's important to have your own voice, your own tone, and also your own accomplishments. So yeah, that's my essay.
I started working on my essays in, I think, late January, early February, and I had a few people look over them. And I really agree with the other panelists' recommendations that it's best to be vulnerable and authentic. Like when I first wrote the first draft of my essay, I completely downplayed my time in military and law enforcement because I thought that wasn't who I was anymore. Like I wanted to emphasize my time in community college. But when I took it to the honors program people at my college, they really tore it up and they really recommended that I write about something different. So I decided to completely rewrite the essay about my journey through all the different careers that I've been in and how they made me who I am today. And it was through that reforming of my essay and making myself more authentic that I think really made me stood out. And again, I think that it's very important that you be vulnerable in your essays. Like you want the admissions officers to know that to feel like you're right there, and they want to know what makes you tick as a person instead of just your stats and how good you look on paper.
And going back, so if you could, go back to before you had started the transfer process, what do you wish you had known?
It's not fair. They have more time to think. What I wish I had known. I guess I wish I had known that it was just not a big deal. Like I definitely spent way too much time talking about the applications, freaking out over them. Once I submitted, especially my Stanford app, I went back and read my answers and I was like, oh my God, how did I wrote the wrong word there. How does that no way I'm gonna get in. I just really overreacted. And it's just, I think being able to sort of take a break and just once it's submitted, just know that it's submitted and it's okay and go on and do your own thing, which I eventually got to. But I do wish I could at least go back and tell myself to just take a deep breath and that everything is going to be okay.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a big deal. Nothing is. I don't really think that I wish I knew anything different than I know right now. It's just such a great learning experience to actually go through an application and figure out really who you are. I know it's cliche and it's really what everybody else says, but going back through your time at both your institution and anywhere else you've been in your life and really having that formal story about you is just such an important self-reflection. And learning throughout the application and just fixing and re-editing your essays and looking through the questions is just such an important process in itself. I wouldn't really change anything.
I don't know what exactly I would wish that I had known before I started, but one piece of advice that I would impart on people is that with admissions this competitive, where there's many thousands of people usually competing for, I believe, 20 to 30 spots, you have to realize that a lot of this will depend on the minutia of your application. And to a degree, I know some people may disagree with me about this, but to a degree, how the minutia of how you're perceived by the initial can come down to luck of whoever is doing your application that day. So I would not stress so much about this because one's college does not define you, and regardless of where you end up, the qualities that made you successful where you're at right now will make you successful somewhere else.
Awesome, thank you. And I do want to, just for the tips on essays, I do want to say I talked to a professor, Stanford undergraduate admissions officer, and they said that if your essay falls on the ground and your friend picks it up and they're able to recognize that it's you and your essay, that's a good essay. So all of the tips about being authentic, being yourself, being a reflection of who you are and what you've learned, these are all fantastic. So thank you so much for that. My question to you is, what were the extracurriculars that most impacted you in community college?
I think that, I mean, I really stand by this. Like, if you've ever seen me before, like, not to say that anyone would have, but if you have, I really push for only doing things that you're really passionate about doing. And I really try to follow that. And your passions change. So some of the things I did before are things I wouldn't do right now, but they're what helped me figure out what it is that I wanted to do and what it is that I cared about. One of those especially was the honors project. I know there's one at Anza. Fabiana is involved in that. But that really helped me because I ended up doing research on what I thought I wanted to do, which was like neuroscience. And then I also did research in political science and international relations, and I realized I loved one so much more than the other. Um, Honestly, and I think associated students also changed my life. It just gave me a community to be a part of. And I think finding a community at your community college is difficult, but can really help you grow as an individual. And then the last one is just an internship that I did externally, and that also just really taught me a lot more about myself. I think ultimately that's sort of the thing that I took away from all of my extracurriculars, was that they helped me grow and taught me more about who I was. And it kind of returns to Shadi's point about how you really want to figure out kind of like what it is you're doing and who you are, and that's what you should be taking from them, as opposed to like the title of Phi Theta Kappa or Alpha Gamma Sigma or whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's very important to not be defined by one thing you did at community college. And I really want to drive that point. It's you've gained so much experience throughout 2 years, whether it's throughout activities, whether it's throughout your time really just doing homework and studying. You gain a lot as a person, and you bring a lot to the table as well. As a community college student, you have a very different experience than a four-year student. And throughout that time, you're learning, you're growing, you're really pursuing your passions as an individual and learning what those passions are. For me, I learned a lot about myself through like an internship at SLAC, which is Stanford's national lab. I also was a part of several projects at NASA, and that really was the backbone, I feel like, to my other extracurriculars. I think it's also very important to recognize, like Ariana said, like the community that's surrounding you at community college. I formed a great study group and friends that I'm still friends with today, and really having them push you and having them help you pursue your goals is just a very important thing overall.
To me, I think the most important extracurricular that I did while I was in community college was I hate to keep on calling back on being in the Army Reserve, but that was really what shaped me as a person for the first 6 years of my life after high school. Like every quarter, I mean every semester, there would be an exercise in South Korea that the South Korean military and the U.S. military would participate in. And for 2 weeks every semester, I would go to South Korea and I would basically be a full-time intelligence analyst there, studying North Korean strategic military capabilities, like the North Korean economy. And while I was there, I really fell in love. I think that's where I really fell in love with economics and international relations, seeing how the U.S. and Asia interacted. And it was because I went on so many of those 2 week breaks from school to South Korea for work that I think really made me a huge part of, sorry, made a huge part of who I am. The other extracurriculars that I did through community college was associate students like Ariana, and I think that really gave me such a great family to be a part of. And The other extracurricular that I really credit for giving me a great experience was interning at a local police department while I was in community college. So by the time that I had applied to become a police officer, I already had about 100 hours of regular patrol. And at 20 years old, having the experience of being in a police officer's shoes, doing those hours, really gave me a lot of experience that I still look back on today, even though I'm not in that field.
Thank you. And so the next question is, how many recommendation letters did you get? And what was your process in choosing who to get them from and how to go about it all?
I got all 4. You can get up to 4. 2, I think, required are the academics, and then you can get 1 professional and 1 personal. For the academics, they also tell you that 1 should be from your major. So I got 1 from a political science professor and then 1 from a history professor. And those were pretty easy for me because I already knew what professors knew me best. Interestingly, I got a different political science professor to do my Stanford one, and then a different one to do my Georgetown one. And the reason I chose one over the other, like, one was the head of our department and 1 knew me better, and the one who knew me better wrote my Stanford recommendation letter. I do think that helped. I will say I've talked to people who have applied to Stanford, and they ask people for rec letters kind of based on the name of the person, and ended up not getting in. And I kind of did that too for Georgetown. I think that it was so much more beneficial to be asking professors who knew me because I had spent time in their office hours. I did an honors project research paper with them, things like that. For the personal one, I also chose someone at my school who I'd done a lot of work with for clubs and things like that. And then the professional one, I chose someone I'd interned for. And I chose the person, again, who knew me better, as opposed to the person who'd actually gone to Stanford. I know a lot of people think about that too. They think they need to have like direct connections to Stanford, but I think you really have to be careful with what you're picking because that is beneficial, but if they don't know you well enough, they're not going to be able to write a letter that really complements the rest of your application.
I'm not really sure how accurate this is, but for me, I thought of my letters of rec as more of like an affirmation to what was going on in your essays, right? Like I said, you reflect upon yourself and you really build a character for yourself. And letters of recommendation are supposed to reassure the admissions officer that that is you, that is your voice, that is your personality. I also did all 4 essays. I did my 2 academic ones. I think this resonates more with a lot of engineering students, but a lot of your prerequisites tend to be math at community college. So I had a math professor do one of my letters of recommendation, and the other was a engineering professor. For my personal statement, I refer to my counselor who knew me on a personal level, I think just a bit more than my professors and friends, or not my friends, but my professors. And for my professional one, I refer to my mentor at NASA.
I got all 4. I also submitted all 4 letters of recommendation, and I got letters of recommendation from one of my economics professors and my criminal justice professor because both of them I was pretty close with and I had known well. And the other letters of recommendation I got were from one of my former platoon sergeants, and then another was from a family friend who knew me very well and was mentoring me. And I think the letters of recommendation are also an important part. And my advice for them is in order to get a professor to vouch for you, you need to be a student that's worth vouching for. And I really did that by being very active in class discussions and being passionate about the subjects that I was in. So I think that's a huge part in getting letters of recommendation, that you should be easily recognizable to the professor just for your participation in the class and your fire for the subject.
Thank you so much. That's incredibly helpful. I know that's something that we are all stressed about because UCs don't require SATs. They don't require like letters of recommendation. So This is a lot more hoops we have to jump through suddenly. So thank you. My next question is about financial aid and just kind of getting an idea because Stanford is a private university. It's about $50,000 a year. That's a lot of money. Did you guys go through financial aid? Do you have advice for students about how to look for financial aid for private schools?
Yep. Fun fact, your total costs will be $80,000 a year. In terms of financial aid, what I personally did was just FAFSA, and I did not know. I think Shadi's in the same boat as me. This is actually how we kind of met. But like, I did not know about CSS profiles. Yeah, that's important. That's how you kind of get into Stanford's money and their endowment and their scholarships, which is what's basically funding my education at this point. There is something I don't quote me on this, go look it up, but I think it's if you make less than 120K, you are eligible for need-based financial aid. And if you're until you're 25, you will always by Stanford be considered a dependent of your family, which is important to know even if you are independent, unless you have your own dependents. There's all this like stuff, but you can totally reach out to their financial aid office and ask if you have questions like that, if you have a more unique situation. Um, I think do your FAFSA. FAFSA helped me with the UCs too. It'll at least give you the ability, even if you're not eligible for like state money or federal money, it just shows that you need scholarships. And like in that a way that I got scholarships from UCLA and UC Berkeley too. They were from the school as opposed to the government. Last thing is if you are in Phi Theta Kappa, you can apply for stuff. There are a few that I wish I had applied to. If I'm not mistaken, maybe Dale can expand on like Jack Kent Cook and stuff like that. But looking in that manner is useful. And then if your school gives scholarships, that's worth applying to as well. So I have one from the College of San Mateo. But just searching, looking, it is a lot of work. Unfortunately, it's another like thing you have to do, but private schools do give decent aid if you need it. So there is that to consider.
That was a super, super elaborate answer, which is good. I think it's very important to reach out to people as well, like not just look into programs and stuff like that, but reaching out to like a financial aid officer, I believe, or reaching out to specific people who can help you more on a case-by-case basis. You could also reach out to more people that are related to scholarships in a sense that they're in charge of dispersing scholarship money and stuff like that. So reaching out to people is just a very, very important thing, and I really want to drive that point as well. It's very important to talk to specific people who will tell you like, oh, this is an opportunity just for you. Like, oh, you're an engineering student studying mechanical engineering. This is a great opportunity for you.
I would just like to reiterate the advice of the other two panelists. Um, Stanford is very fortunate in that it gives its students such a huge support system financially for those that attend. And I would really recommend while you are in community college to apply for scholarships that are offered through your community college, and also external scholarships that you can get through the scholarship office. And again, I would recommend preparing to start the FAFSA and the CSS profiles as early as the forms are open, because many of them will require documentation that does take some time to get.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful so far. And I didn't realize it was 80,000. Thank you for telling me that. I thought it was 50. I guess I'm looking at old numbers. So that's incredibly useful. So yeah, it's a great way to start your applications early as well for community college. I mean, for Stanford, for the Common App, as well as look at FAFSA at the same time. I know there's a lot of resources at Anza as well. If anyone's interested, we can help you with that later. My next question is, what was the most challenging part of your transfer journey?
Interestingly, I've never considered any of my journey to be challenging. I do sometimes look back at my time in community college, especially now that I like don't leave my house, and I wonder how I did all the things that I did. But I was just so like happy to do all of it that it was like enjoyable. And yeah, the essays are like not that fun to write. It's not fun to manually type your transcript in like 10 different times. And it was definitely hard I completed some applications and ultimately sat down with myself and chose not to submit them because I realized I really didn't want to go to those schools. I was only applying for the name, things like that. But they were all part of the process. I don't know. I mean, we all go through it. We've gone through it. You guys are going to go through it. It's going to be okay. I think just as long as you're doing like what you want to do, you're applying to places you actually are excited to go to, then it feels worth it. It doesn't feel as challenging. It's not a great answer, but
I also think similarly that like we all go through it and everybody faces like challenges and stuff like that throughout their time. I do think that like really finding opportunities was more difficult throughout community college because you're really seeking them yourself. You aren't really given an opportunity per se. You as a community college student, you have to go to these specific companies and reach out to people, reach out to opportunities, submit applications, stuff like that. Once you transfer to a 4-year, you'll notice a lot more, like you'll see opportunities in your emails, which is just I think is something different when I recognize, like my emails were just a lot of, oh, do this, here's an opportunity for you at this company. And yeah, I think for me it was just going out to find those opportunities was a bit challenging, but not really challenging, just a bump in the road.
I would say that the most challenging part for me was me after I had spent a year away from community college on active duty. And it was during that year that I decided that I wanted to leave government work and I wanted to go pursue what I actually wanted to study more, which was economics. And as as I put in my reservations with the PD and also started to transition away from a mindset of being a career Army Reserve guy, I really felt like I was starting back at square one at my community college. And that was 4 years out of high school. And I saw on Instagram just all the people I had graduated high school with just posting their new diplomas on Instagram. And that really made me feel depressed because I felt like I was starting at square one again. And I had really no degree to my name at the time and that type of thing. But I think it ultimately, I hate to say it's cliche, but it ultimately made me stronger. It made me consider who I am. And I think it was a huge piece of motivation that got me to push through and follow through with this new goal that I had.
Thank you. So we're about to wrap it up, but I just want to ask, how is the transfer support at Stanford now that you're here? What other additional resources or programs or communities that you've been a part of that are targeted towards transfer students?
there are so many resources. It's ridiculous. Specifically for transfers, there's definitely like this transfer cohort. There's Transfer 101. They really do look out for you. I'm sure like if we were on campus, it would be a little different because we'd all be living together with the exception of like those who kind of are over 25. But I still think, I might be mistaken, but I still think they also live in like a similar living community. I mean, it really is, I think, what you make of it. Although I will say that at community college, it was really the same thing. Those opportunities are there. Granted, at Stanford, there's more money, so there's more. But you kind of have to go and decide what you want to do. But there is definitely a ton of a ton of support. We get a lot of emails every single day. But it's cool. It's nice to be a part of that kind of community. But I do also want to mention that at the UCs I got into and the UCs my friends are at, they have this same level of transfer support, which I think is amazing. I'm really glad that these schools have kind of done that. But it seems to me that this is, it's a norm to kind of support your transfer students, which is great.
I agree. There's a ton of support. I do also think that like going to a UC, which is specifically like more of a transfer school, like it's more of a generalized thing. Like you have thousands of students coming in every year as a transfer versus the small applicant pool that you're coming from as a Stanford student. So it's really nice to have like a smaller community that you really get to know all the transfers. I'm pretty sure I know all the transfers within our cohort, and that allows for a lot more specific advice and support per se. It's just great. There's just tremendous amounts of support and people that are there to help you through it all.
For me, I have really pulled on my assigned transfer mentor to guide me through a lot of the processes at Stanford. And although Stanford usually has a very small cohort of transfers every year, I still think that they are doing their best during these times to provide personalized support to transfers. And I think Stanford is still in the process of improving their transfer support systems because usually they only allow in enough transfers as the same amount of people that have dropped out from traditional students. Like usually as a transfer student, you're filling the slot of someone who dropped out. But it's still nice to see Stanford is now taking transfers to closer to the community and providing more support.
Thank you guys so much for being here. We're really, really grateful. That was all incredible advice.